You guys know from the title, it is finally here, the end of summer jumpsuit as part of my hashtag Make 9 2023. So if that's some content you would like to see, please continue to watch. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video I am going to be sharing with you a very quick pattern review, and then we're going to get off to the sew along so you can sew this jumpsuit together utilizing Butterick 6890 and Butterick 6891. Now you guys wanted me to do this from my hashtag Make 9 2023. If you are unsure of what I'm talking about, my hashtag Make 9 2023 is a sew along base for 9 things for this year that will be all sew along. You guys, the viewers, get to vote on which pattern that you want me to do based off of the category. So I want to say that in the description box below, there is a Google form, and that Google form is for all the latest fall patterns that just released. I will be doing sew alongs for those as well. So make sure you look in the description box below so you could get over to the Google form so you could check out the jacket as well as the pants. Those are the 2 things that you will be able to vote on for the next sew alongs that will be for the fall season. All right. And then after that, it's one more sew along when all the winter patterns come out. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. But if you are new to the channel, welcome. Hello, Ciao, Guten, Aloha, Hola, Konnichiwa, Gwaan, Sabonani, Shalom, Bonjour. If you're returning, you guys know what to do by now. Go get you a quick snack, something to drink. Come on back so we can go ahead and get into this quick pattern review. And then I'm going to go ahead and release y'all so y'all can get over to the sew along, what you guys are here for, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into it. All right, so you guys know that this pattern review is for Butterick 6890, but it's the same pattern, but in the woman's size for Butterick 6891. Now, I have the pattern of Butterick 6890. I cut, a size 14. I'm going to say that now, but I probably should have went ahead and sized it up, okay? I did not do that, but I'm saying that I did size it up, but I should have probably just cut a bigger size. To each his own. It is what it is. Okay, so it is what it is. But I'll tell you guys all the details. But first, let's go ahead and get into the pattern description. So I'm going to give my own like I normally do, simply because I did not look at the Simplicity website. Your girl got a little lazy on that. But I like to give my own simply because I can give you more details. All right. So this is a Mrs. or woman's jumpsuit in 2 lengths. You have the shorter length that goes kind of like to your mid calf, and then you have one that kind of like hits the floor. So, I mean, you could kind of do it in multiple different versions, but I did a romper. And the reason why I did the romper is because I only had 3 yards of fabric and I had to use what I had, right? I didn't have enough to actually do a complete jumpsuit. So I did the romper, and it's still great, right? So you have a placket in the front which features 4 buttons. You also have a invisible zipper. You will need to use a invisible zipper for buttons for the buttonholes as well. Now, the invisible zipper is in the front. And I know you're wondering like, yo, Rochelle, give us the detail to why do we put an invisible zipper in the front? There's a reason. You can skip and omit the zipper if you choose. I'm not saying do so. But I think the invisible zipper is there for an added detail if you just wanted to wear your jumpsuit open without the buttons and just have that zipper for a little bit of cleavage action. I was going to do that, but my husband was like, So that is the pattern description for this pattern. All right. Let's go ahead and get into the sewing skill level. So the sewing skill level for this pattern, I'm going to rate it as average. I think on the Something Delightful website, it states it's easy. I wouldn't say that this pattern is easy because you have to put on pockets, you have to put on flaps, you have to put on invisible zippers. all of that good stuff. So I wouldn't say this is easy if it's rated as easy, but I did not check, so don't quote me on that. But I'm gonna say it's an average to sew pattern. Let's go ahead and get into notions. So the notions needed for the jumpsuit is 1 invisible zipper. I used a long one. You'll see that in the sew along, but you only need a 7-inch invisible zipper and 4 buttons. I'm gonna say make your buttons coordinate. I had to use light green buttons because that's what was in my stash. I didn't have dark green, so I used what I had. It actually elevated it a little bit, in my opinion, right? Let's go ahead and talk about fabric used. So the fabric used for this pattern is from Wax Prints, Lace and More. This came with another fabric that I used back in 2021 when I did the Disney African Princess collection. I forgot which... to be honest with you, I forgot which Disney princess that I did, that I used the other 3 yards of something else. That's what I could tell you, okay? But it was only 3 yards from Wax Prints, Lace and More. I did reach out to her. I reached out to CJ from House of Mami Wata and Afrik Clothing Store, Cynthia. I reached out to them to see if there was any more fabric before doing this, and no one has this fabric. So I could tell you that this fabric is completely sold out everywhere that I buy a card print from. So I will tell you that this is the in-card print, 100% cotton from Wax Prints, Lace and More. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces. So I'm not gonna really talk about the pattern pieces right here because you're gonna see it in the sew along. So I'm gonna tell you that for the jumpsuit, I use a total of 10 pattern pieces. Pattern pieces 1 through 5, and then pattern pieces 8 through 12 in order to do the jumpsuit romper, whatever you want to call it, right? Let's go ahead and get into pattern sizing. So for the pattern, and if I'm incorrect because I don't have the pattern right in front of me, the first pattern is, I think the first pattern is 6 to 12, and that second pattern is 12 to 20. Then you have the woman sizes I'm going to put up on the screen. Simply because I think for the woman size, it runs from like 22W to 28W, but I'm going to put it up on the screen because I don't have the woman pattern and I did not look at the Simplicity website. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen in terms of pattern sizing. Let's go ahead and talk about the size that I cut. So the size that I cut was the small size 14, for the jumpsuit as well as the pants or shorts in my case, right? I did have to size up at the hips. So since I had to size up at the hips, I had to add a total of 1 inch all the way around for the hips in order for it to fit. Now, I will tell you that I'm glad that I added that 1 inch, but I really didn't need to. Simply because the hips, when I measured, I believe it was like a 44.5, almost 45. And then I added an inch, making it 46. And it still fits, but I really didn't need to add it, to be honest with you. But that's the size that I cut. Let's talk about modifications. Did I make any modifications to this pattern? No, the only thing that I did was I did do the facing for the neck area, and then I had to do bias tape around the armhole. You guys know how I feel about bias tape around the armhole, but your girl was trying to stretch fabric and make fabric work, and I drafted armhole facing, but it just was not enough fabric in order to do armhole facing. So we are here, and I had to, you know, do bias tape for the armhole. So that's what I did for mine. I'm going to try to show you right here. So I did finish mine off, and it's clean with my own bias tape that I made. Okay. So I took some green poplin fabric that I will show you because I am making it for the shirt dress that I will hopefully be showing you next week. Yes, I already started it. I already cut the fabric. I already started it. I'm sewing it up. You guys, well, I think you guys will love this one as well. But I did use the scrap fabric and make that bias tape. So, you know, for my bias tape girlies, yes, I did make some bias tape, all right, and had to use it. All right, let's talk about, did it look like the photos or the drawings on the pattern envelope? Yes, it does. I think, to be honest with you, my photos look better, but you know, yeah, we're just gonna put it like that. Just a little bit of in the pattern for the smaller size. Now, when it comes to the women's sizes, I think the model in the blue, she's wearing the outfit. Very gorgeous, okay? So yes, that's what I'm gonna say about this pattern. Yes, it does look like the photos are the drawn on the pattern envelope. Are the instructions easy to follow? So to be honest with you, I did look at the instructions, and from the instructions that I did when it got to the pant section, I want to make one caveat, and I have the instructions. So I know in the sew along you're going to hear it, but I want to clear it up here as well. So they want you to do the bodice kind of like the same for all views, and that goes for steps number 1 through 23. You will do the exact same thing for all views, no matter what view you are doing. After step number 23, if you are making the jumpsuit, skip all the way over to step number 36. Do not do what I did in the sew along and get to attaching the front band. And I'm going to tell you why. Is simply because you will have to unpick it, which I did show you how to unpick it and do it the correct way. But I went ahead and did it as if I was doing view A and then had to unpick it. It is in the sew along, so you wouldn't get tripped up. But I want to say it here that it is a mistake that I made, and I corrected and showed you in the sew along how to correct it. So that's how we make, when we make mistakes, we show you guys, or well, I do, show you how to correct it. All right. All right, so that is in terms of the instructions, but outside of that, yes, the instructions are easy to follow. Likes and dislikes. Do I have any dislikes? I don't have any dislikes for the pattern whatsoever, outside of when I first pulled this pattern and looked at the notions, invisible zipper. I was confused to why we need an invisible zipper, but I know why we need an invisible zipper. There's no dislikes whatsoever. It's all love here for this pattern. Let's talk about first time experience. So the only first time experience I have is putting a invisible zipper on a jumpsuit in the front. I have never done that. So that's why it was weird for me to have to put a invisible zipper in the front of a jumpsuit when you have to still pull the jumpsuit off. But I still like that detail. So if I wanted to wear a tank top or a bralette underneath and just leave the buttons open, I still have that zipper area to still, you know, zip up. And I will tell you the reason why I belted it is because it is a little loose fitting, and I like that. However, I think I wanted to snatch in the waist a little bit more by elevating it with a belt. So I did go ahead and add that belt detail and the hat. Yes, okay. Would I sew this pattern again? Absolutely, yes. I would sew this pattern again. I don't know when I'm going to get around to it, but I could see sewing the dress up as well. All right. Would I recommend this pattern to others? Yes, I would recommend this pattern to others. That's why I did the sew along. So you are able to go ahead and follow along with the sew along as well, because you guys asked me for a sew along. So this is that sew along. All right. And let's go ahead and talk about my pattern rating. So my pattern rating for this pattern is a simple 5 out of 5. I enjoy doing this. Now, I will tell you this. It is actually a quick sew. After cutting the fabric and, you know, interfacing and all that stuff, if you take your time, you should be done with this entire project in one day, 4 hours. Even with my sew along. And the reason why I'm going to tell you that is simply because the bodice was easy to sew. After dark, I mean, it's up to you if you want to do the pockets. You can leave the pockets off. You can leave the flaps off. This is a good jumpsuit. So I want to tell you guys that as well. You should have this entire thing sewn up in roughly about 4 hours if you know how to put on pockets and everything. If you are kind of like in the beginner to intermediate stage, if you are a beginner, I will say definitely break it up into 2 days. Sew the bodice one day, then sew on the pants or shorts or whatever you're making the second day and attach it. But I would say if you're doing it all in one day, about 6 hours for my beginners. All right. Well, that's it for the pattern review. I hope you enjoyed it. So now you know what I'm going to say. Go to your concession stand, aka your kitchen. Go get some snacks and something to drink, and let's go ahead and get over to that sew along. go ahead and get into the next sew along as part of the End of Summer Jumpsuit. So we know that fall's here, so I decided to choose a fall color, which I will show you the fabric here shortly. But this is pretty much the last thing that I am sewing for summer, but I'm actually transitioning this over to fall, all right? So this is Butterick 6890. If you have picked up this is the missus sides, the woman's sides is 6891. So you can use either one of the patterns. So I'm glad you guys picked this one, and this is the one that won for hashtag Make9 2023, and this is the jumpsuit that won, all right? So let's go ahead and get over into the pattern instructions for this pattern. All right, so in terms of the pattern instructions, we're going to be doing the jumpsuit in this sew along. So taking you guys over to the pattern pieces, which I will show you here shortly, but make sure you pull and cut out pattern piece 1 through 5. And then you will also need to cut out pattern piece number 8 to 12, okay? So make sure you do that. Also, I want to draw your attention to the jumpsuit, which is view C. So looking at the cutting layout right here on view C, which is the jumpsuit, just take note of the sides that you're going to cut, all right? Now, if you are cutting a size 16 through 24, now me personally, I cut a size 14. So looking at a size 14, there's not a pattern piece that's going to be laid with the wrong side of the pattern piece facing down, right side up. But if you are doing sizes 16 through 24, any of those sizes, your pattern piece number 11, which is your pants back, you need to have that pattern piece down on the fabric, wrong side facing up, and then cut around that piece. Same goes with pattern piece number 1, which is the front of your, the bodice front. You need to do the same thing for that one as well, all right? That's if you are doing view C, the jumpsuit. Also, make sure you interface pattern piece number 3, which is your flap, as well as pattern piece number 8, which is your front band, all right? If you want to interface your sash to make it thicker, you can do that as well. That's a personal preference. Now, I want to draw your attention to some of the instructions as well. In terms of seam allowance, it's 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless told to do something else otherwise, all right? Steps number 1 through 23 will be the same. I did draft my own facing, which I will show you here shortly. I draft facing for my neck edge as well as my armhole. I have a whole video on how to draft facing, so I'm not gonna explain to you guys how to do that here. I will go ahead and put that video in the description box below so you could go to that video if you want to draft facing and not have to do the bias tape, all right? You're welcome. All right, once you do once we do steps number 1 through 23, we're going to skip all the way over to step number 36, which are your pants, all right? And then we will do 36 all the way to, I think it's 52. 36 all the way to 53, which will be the pants for the jumpsuit. Once we do that, we're all done, all right? So that is the pattern instructions. Now that we talked about the pattern instructions for this jumpsuit, we're gonna go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this jumpsuit. So let's go ahead and get right on into it once I fold up these pattern instructions. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this garment. All right, so let's talk about the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct your jumpsuit. So the pattern pieces is in no specific order, so I'm just going to show you as I pull it off the stack. But it's pattern piece number 12, which is your pockets for your pants. You need to cut 4 of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 3, your flaps. You need to cut 2 of fabric and also interface 2. Next pattern piece are your pockets for your bust. If you want to do that, if you do not want the pockets on your bust or the flaps, you can omit that, all right? So it's pockets for all views. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 1, which is your bodice front. You need to cut 2 of fabric. I'm also gonna tell you, make sure you clip all of your notches Mark your dots, and also do not forget to mark your darts as well. All right, so that's pattern piece number 1. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5, your yoke back. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 4, which is your bodice back. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. Next pattern piece, now this pattern piece, it's folded up funky for a reason, but this is your front band, which is pattern piece number 8. Now, I am doing view C, and this is a long piece, but I'm just gonna show you what it is. This is what it is when I cut to this view C line, but I'm going to pin it back so I know which side is the wrong side and the right side until I mark it, all right? Now, you also have facing pieces. I created facing pieces, so this is my yoke back armhole. I cut 2 of fabric. I'm also gonna interface that piece. And with drafting armhole facing, I just did a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so that's why it looks so small. But this is my bodice back, and this is my yoke back armhole facing. I also drafted pattern pieces from my bodice front, cut 2 of fabric, and then my bodice back, I'm cutting 1 on the fold of fabric. I showed you how to do that in that video, facing video, drafting faces for armholes, front, back, neckline as well. So, and how to draft ties in the back of your neck if you do not want button closures and stuff. So I do have a video for that. It is in the description box below if you are interested in drafting facing instead of using bias tape, all right? Now, outside of that, you will need your pant pattern piece, and those pattern pieces are pattern piece number 10 and 11. As well, you do not see that on the table because we're going to be making some slight adjustments to it, but I'm going to show you right quick. So pattern piece number 10, which is your pants front, you're going to cut 2 of fabric. And then pattern piece number 11, which is also your pants back, you're going to cut 2 of fabric. Now, those are all the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct this jumpsuit. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools and supplies you will need in order to construct this jumpsuit. All right, so I have the slide up where I'm gonna tell you the items that you will need in order to construct this jumpsuit. It's up on the slide, so take a look at that. But some of the items you're gonna need is your regular basic sewing supplies that I tell you in each video, which will be, of course, the pattern and pattern instructions, your pins or your wonder clips. You will need scissors, 1 for paper, 1 for fabric, never mix the 2 there. Rotary cutters, I use 2, 1 for paper, 1 for fabric, never mix the 2 there. Your pattern weights to keep the fabric intact. You will also need your marking tools, which is disappearing ink marker or a white soluble pencil. Any type of rulers as well, your pens and pencils, a tape measure to take measurements from your body. Definitely take measurement of your upper bust, your full bust, your under bust, as well as your waist and your hips for this pattern. Also, I have some drafting paper and tape. And the drafting paper and tape is because I need to size the pattern up. I also have a calculator that I always use, and that's basically to make sure that I take accurate measurements and size the pattern up as well. And then in terms of notions, the only notions that you will need will be buttons. And because we are doing view C, you will need 4 5/8 inch buttons. Also, from the back of the pattern envelope, it says you will need a 7-inch invisible zipper. Now, this is a jumpsuit. You will have to pull it down. So when we get to that portion about the invisible zipper, I know you're wondering like, well, where the heck is this invisible zipper gonna go? It goes in the front. And I'm gonna show you all of that here shortly, all right? Well, those are all the tools and supplies that you need in order to get started. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab pattern piece number 10 and pattern piece in 11, and I'm gonna show you the crotch and how to size that crotch up if you need to, like I do. So let's go ahead and deal with the crotch. All right, so let's go ahead and deal with this crotch situation. So your girl has to size up the crotch. So a couple of things is I cut a size 14 once again, just to let you know. And the crotch is a little small. It's too small by 2 inches. So I have to size this up. If I move my pattern to a size 16, it's too big, okay? So it's easier for me to size it up instead of take it in, all right? And distort the pattern. And I don't want to do that, all right? So anyway, what we're going to do, what I did, go ahead and grab your tape measure. And what I did is what is called walking the tape measure. So what I did, I'm showing you on pattern piece number 10. So what I did was I measured from the top all the way to the curve. So I'm just going to show you how I did that right quick and tell you how I got my measurement. So I just basically place it all the way around and I just walk it all the way around. And when you get to that curve, kind of like move it around that curve and write your number. Now this one gives me 13 7/8. So that's 13.875. Well, I also have to take out the seam allowance, which 5/8 at the top, 5/8 at the bottom. So that gives me 1.25, which is what I took out. You probably can't see this because I wrote this in pencil, but I have 13.875 minus 1.25. So I'm going to do my measurement one more time to make sure that I have 13.875. Yes, it's 13.875. So I wrote the wrong number down because I wrote down 13.75. So I'm going to erase that and put 13.875. And I'm going to subtract 1.25, which is seam allowance at the top and seam allowance at the bottom. So just make sure in your calculator, whatever your measurement was when you measured around this curve, you're going to take that minus 1.25. And now I get 12.625. Now 12.625 is the same as saying 12 5/8. Okay, so 0.625 is 5/8. All right, you're going to do the exact same thing for the back. So I'm going to grab the back pattern piece and do the exact same thing. And I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to hear me talk to you guys about this, right? All right, so I'm going to do the same thing for my back pattern piece. And that gives me 15 1/4. So that's 15.25. I'm going to take out the seam allowance. The top and the side is 5/8 of an inch, both. So that's 1.25. And 15.25 minus 1.5 gives me 14. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 14, add it to the seam, the crotch curve of the pant front. So I have 14 plus 12.625. Okay. And that gives me a total of 26.625. Now, I need at least minimum 28-inch crotch curve to fit great. So in order to get that, if I did that, that gives me 1.375, which is 1 3/8. Well, instead of doing 1.375 and divide that by 4 because you have 2 fronts, 2 backs, I'm just going to say 1.5. Have a little bit extra room, right? So I'm going to take that 1.5, which is 1.375, as that's close to 1.5 without having too much ease, right? I'm going to divide that by 4. And the reason why we're dividing by 4 is because, like I mentioned, we have 2 fronts and 2 backs. That gives me 0.375. And 0.375 is the same as saying 3/8, okay? So right here at this curve, I'm going to extend it out by 3/8. So I'm just going to go out on this pattern piece. You don't have to do it twice, just once. So 3/8 on this side right here. And then I'm going to also do 3/8 on this side right here. All right. So get some paper, do whatever you have to size up your crotch seam as. Do that and we'll come back and continue. So when I add 15 to 13.75, it gives me 3/4 more than what I need, which is perfect. So the crotch curve is spot on what I need, all right? So the next thing we're gonna look at is the hips, okay? So now I have not measured across, so I'm going to measure across on camera for you guys. And I'm using the pattern piece number 10, which is the pants front. Measuring across, it gives me 11 5/8 or 11.625. So I'm going to take that 11.625, multiply that by 2 because I have two front pieces. And then when I multiply 11.625 and multiply that by 2, it gives me 23.25. Now, because I have two pant leg, one pant leg seam allowance is 1.25. That's the side seam and the crotch curve. And then you have the same thing for the other side. So I'm going to take out 2.5 because I have a total of, you know, 2 pant leg and 4 side seams, for 2 for the left side, 2 for the right side. So that gives me 20.75 for this pant leg. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the back. So grab the back pattern piece and move the front off to the side. And you're going to measure across, same thing that you just did for the front. And it gives me the same thing, 11.625. So I'm going to do the 11.625, multiply that by 2, which gives me 23.25 minus the seam allowance of 2.5, which gives me 20.75. So basically what I'm going to do is take that 20.75 for the front, 20.75 for the back, and it gives me 41.5. Now, because my hips is a 45.5 right now, I need to enlarge my hips by 4 inches. So because I have 2 fronts and 2 backs, I need to divide that by 4. So because I have to enlarge it by 4 inches, I need to take that 4 inches, I need to enlarge it, divide it by 4, and add that at the side seam, which is 1 inch. So for my back pattern piece, right at the hip line, I need to add 1 inch there, and the same thing goes for my back seam allowance, okay? So I'm gonna do that and go ahead and cut out your pants. After you do that, go ahead, cut out your pant pattern pieces, and then we're gonna go ahead and get to sewing. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our sew along for the jumpsuit view C. So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1. Now I have already done my darts, but I'm gonna tell you what you need to do. Make sure you transfer this placement line like I have said before. Make sure you transfer your dots because you will need those for your pockets if you are doing the pocket and the flaps, okay? So I have already done this, and what you're gonna do is go ahead and pin out your darts. Make your darts right here and then press your darts down, okay? Towards your waist. After you do that, I'm gonna move pattern piece number 1, which is my front, out of the way. I'm gonna grab pattern piece number 2, which are the pockets. Now I have already made one. I have done one side of my bodice to cut down on basically time, okay? But I'm gonna show you what you need to do. Now I made a little clip right here at the end where the fold line is. It makes it easier. So I'm gonna make sure I'm looking at the right side of my fabric. I'm gonna fold this down where my clips are. You could do the same thing, or you could measure down and see how far it is. I'm going to press this with my iron. Then using 5/8. Now, according to the pattern, this is about 5/8 of an inch in. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to stitch down, across, and back up using a regular length stitch. Once you do that, you're going to press your pockets in. Now, we have done pockets like this before on the channel. So you're going to press your pockets in, trim down just at the very top where you have flipped it over. You're going to trim down and then turn it right side out. All right, give it a good press. And then when we come back, we're going to go ahead and pin it, okay, to our front. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my pocket done, go ahead and grab your top or your bodice front. And what you're going to do is match up the top with that stitching line. Now I'm going to try to center it there because the line is a little long, and you'll see what I'm talking about when I start doing the flaps. And then what you're going to do is after you feel that it's straight, go ahead and pin your pockets onto your bodice front. If you are doing the pockets, if you are not doing the pockets, just hang tight for the next portion, or you could skip once this is not live anymore, all right? Or premiering, I should say. So go ahead and pin your pocket in place now. Now that I have my pocket in place, what I'm going to do is using about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, I'm just going to top stitch the side and across. So both sides and the lower edge is what I'll be top stitching. So go ahead and top stitch your pocket in place now. After you top stitch your pocket in place, we're going to start working on 3 because cut down on how many times you go back and forth to the sewing machine. So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 3, which is your flaps, and you have a line in the middle, right, which is your fold line. So what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to fold your flaps right side together. Go ahead and pin the sides on both sides. Now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and the end and sew both side seams. Trim it down and then turn it right side out and give it a press. So go ahead and top stitch around both sides and the bottom for your pockets, and then go ahead and stitch your flap using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. Trim it down, turn it right side out. Do not do the top edge right here, just both sides, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the pockets done, I have the flap done and turned right side out. So now what we're going to do is make sure your flap is up, and you're going to basically make sure the bottom is centered between the bottom line. So I'm going to bring this to where you can see it. You have 2 lines. You have a bottom line and a top line. So what you want to do is line up your flap with the bottom line close to the pocket, and you're going to pin. So I'm just going to pin all the way across. So go ahead and pin now. All right, so now that I have my flap pinned, so what I'm gonna do is there's a line right here. You're gonna sew on that top line. So basically it's about, I wanna say 3/8 of an inch. This line right here, it's about 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to sew basically mirroring that line. If you cannot see that line, I would advise you to draw that line onto your flap and then sew on that line, okay? Once you do that, you're going to trim it down. After trimming it down, you're going to press your flap down and then top stitch using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to say that one more time. What you want to do, and I'm just going to kind of show you, you want to basically bring that line. If you cannot see it and you don't know how far off it is, it's about 3/8 of an inch. You're going to basically make sure you stitch across a straight line for sure. All right, stitch across. Once you do that, you're going to trim this portion down. After you trim it down, you're going to bring your flap down and press, and then top stitch 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to keep your flap down. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our flaps done on the bodice front, our flaps as well as our pockets, go ahead and move this out of the way. Grab pattern piece number 4, which is your bodice back. Now go ahead and grab your bodice back, open it out, and what we're going to do now is make our pleats. Now, one thing I want to tell you is make sure you make your pleats in the right direction. So if you take your bodice back pattern piece that was cut on the fold, you will see a pleat line that says going to the right. All right. So this pleat is going to go to the right, just like this. And then you're going to pin. When you flip this pattern piece over, now you see that your pleat is going to the left. So right here at this line, you're just going to make sure that you pin it to the left and pin this one to the right, and it forms your pleat in the middle. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So what I'm gonna do is make my pleat. First, I'm gonna take this one that's going to the right, take that line, match it up with the other line, and I'm going to pin. Now I'm gonna turn it around so I'm able to work with it. Make sure that when you are sewing, make sure you are turning it to where you could definitely work with your fabric instead of being over your fabric like this, okay? I want to be able to work with it, so that's why I'm turning it, and I'm gonna make sure I move the second line over to the first line, and then I'm gonna pin as well. All right, so now that I have it pinned, I'm gonna make sure to go ahead and baste across. Because I don't like pulling out basting stitches when I'm done, I'm just gonna baste across about 3/8 of an inch. I'm just gonna kind of do a quick back stitch at the beginning and at the end to hold that in place. And then I'm gonna press my pleat down. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we went ahead and made our pleat in our bodice back, which is pattern piece number 4. So let me write that on the wrong side of my fabric so I know it's pattern piece number 4, the bodice back, to keep up with all pieces so you can see for sake of this tutorial. So I wrote it right here. So what we're going to do is with the right sides together, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 5, which is your yoke back. And I have already wrote it on my pattern piece. And what you're going to do is with right sides together, we're going to pin our yoke back to our yoke back to our bodice back, all right? So go ahead and match up the notches. So you have a notch right there. So match up that notch and pin. And then you have double notches right here. You're going to match up those double notches, pin right there, and then pin all the way across your bodice back as well as your yoke back. So pin your yoke back to your bodice back now. Now that I have my yoke back pinned to my bodice back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, go ahead and back stitch at the beginning and at the end, sewing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. Once you finish doing that, go ahead and trim your seam allowance down, and then you're going to press your seam allowance up towards the yoke back. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my yoke back pinned onto my bodice back, this is the right side of my fabric. This is the wrong side of my fabric. So make sure you press that seam allowance up towards your yoke back, okay? So go ahead and do that if you have not. Now what we're gonna do is attach our front to the back at the shoulder seam. So go ahead and grab your front pattern pieces. And with right sides together, we're gonna go ahead and pin our front to our back at the shoulders. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and match up the shoulders. You have one notch at the shoulder. Make sure that you match up that notch and then pin all the way across both shoulders. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew across both shoulder seams. Once you do that, go ahead and sew your side seam as well. And basically you're gonna do the same thing, cut down on time. You guys know how I am by now. So therefore go ahead and pin at that notch. So you have a notch right here. So you're gonna match up your notches on your side seam, pin there. Make sure that your darts are pressed down and then pin all the way, pin the length of your side seam. So go ahead and pin your side seam now. Now, normally if you are doing a sleeve, I wouldn't pin right now, but because I didn't have enough fabric in order to do a sleeve, I have to make this jumpsuit sleeveless. So we're going with a sleeveless option right now. So I'm just gonna go ahead and sew up my side seam as well. So I pinned one side. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin this side as well, matching up my notches as well. So go ahead and pin the side seam as well. Once you pin your side seams together, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew your side seam as well as your shoulder seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our shoulder seams done, we have our side seams done. Now, this is the part where my girlies who love bias tape come into effect, because you guys know your girl is not team bias tape, but we have to put on some bias tape, kind of, for my armholes. Because I did not have enough fabric to do sleeve, I have to do some bias tape around my armhole. Now, for my neck edge, you guys know that I did a facing. So this is my facing pieces that I'm going to do. I have showed you guys how to do facing pieces before. So basically what you're gonna do is I'm gonna move my top out the way so you could kind of see what I'm doing on the table. So basically I'm going to take my back pattern piece, which was cut on the fold, by the way, and then I'm just going to make sure that I attach my pieces together, right sides together, just like this. You should have a notch. And then basically what I'm going to do is stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance across. And then I'm going to finish off my seam allowance separately instead of together. Once I do that, I'm going to press the seam allowance open and finish off the bottom edge. It's the same way that I have done for every single sew along that I have done facing for. So I'm going to do my facings. If you are a facing girly like myself, go ahead and do your facing, and then I'll come back and attach my facing to my bodice. But if you are a bias tape girly, no shade to y'all whatsoever, go ahead and do your bias tape at your neck edge as well as your armhole area. One thing I want to mention is before you put on your bias tape, make sure you stay stitch. Let me move the facing out of the way right quick. Before you do either method, make sure you stay stitch around your neck edge and your armhole before you either put the bias tape on or do the facing pieces. All right, go ahead and do whichever method that you want now, making sure you stay stitch first, then put on your bias tape or your facing pieces, come back and we'll continue. And when we continue, we'll start attaching everything else like the pants to the bodice. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my facing pieces attached to itself, I went ahead and put in my daughter's label, only because that's what we were working with, and mine is in the drawer, but I'm saving mine for some other things, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and pin my, I'm gonna make sure that my seam allowance for my bodice is pressed towards the back. I'm gonna go ahead and pin my facing pieces all the way around, matching up the shoulder seams on both sides. And I'm just gonna basically pin all the way around. And I figured because I made this, and this is not like your standard, I'll show you how I'm going to pin this and sew it as well. So that's what we're doing here. All right, so go ahead and pin your facing to your bodice if you are team facing instead of team bias tape, okay? So go ahead and pin your facing to your bodice now. All right, so now that I have my facing pinned on, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, and sew all the way around your, all the way around your bodice, and then trim it down, press your seam allowance towards the facing, and then top stitch. All right, well, under stitch. All right. After you understitch, you're just going to tack it down, making a couple of stitches to keep this in place on the inside. All right. So we have done facing so many times on this channel, so you could go to any of my videos. I will drop it in the link below to a very good video with the timestamp to tell you where to start at in that video in order to do facing. All right. So let me go ahead and sew this up, and then I'll come back and show you what's the next steps. So look, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my bodice done. I have my facing in with the label. So I'm going to move my top off to the, well, actually, I'm not going to move my, actually, I am going to move my top off to the side, and we're going to start working on our facing piece, our front band, I'm sorry, our front band. So go ahead and grab your front band. You should have two, right? So what we're going to do is at the bottom, So you should have a notch right there. So at the bottom on the unnotched edge, you're going to make a basting stitch, and that basting stitch needs to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to press to that line and then trim it down. So basically what you're going to do is press in a 1/2 inch right here and then trim it down. Once you trim it down, the next thing you're going to do is with right sides together. I have not done this, but I'm just going to show you. With right sides together, you're going to pin your front band to your bodice, matching up the notches, okay? So let's go ahead and just go to the machine, and we're going to create our basting stitch as well as press it up and trim it down. And I'll show you how you pin the front band onto your top. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my front band pinned to one side. I'm gonna show you how I'm going to do it on the other side. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab my seam ripper and take off this facing piece that I basted down, because I'm gonna need that off for a quick second to put on my front band. So I'm gonna do that, and then we'll go ahead and attach the front band. All right, so now that I have my facing pulled up, so grab your front band. You have a notch right here. You're going to match that up with the notch right there. Make sure that you have the right band and it meets up correctly. And the reason why I say that is because you have a dot right here on your band and a dot right there. If it does not match up, then you have the wrong band and you need to switch the bands, okay? So you're going to pin at that notch, pin at the dot, make sure you match up your dots at the top. And then you have a dot at the bottom as well. Make sure that dot at the bottom match up with the dot at the bottom as well, okay? And then you're going to just pin all the way across or up and down, whichever way you have it, your front band onto your bodice now. All right, so now that I have my front bands pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start at the dot, back stitch at the beginning, and then sew all the way down and back stitch at the end. Once I do that, I'm gonna trim it down and press the seam allowance towards the front band. Go ahead and do that on both sides now. All right, so now that I have my front band done on this side, I'm gonna show you what I did for the other side before. I don't want no one to say that I am confused, Rochelle, what did you do? I'm gonna show you, all right? So now that we have the front band attached, I press my seam allowance towards the band. So now what you're gonna do is you have a dot at the bottom and a dot at the top. I'm hoping you can see this blue dot. You're going to fold it onto itself and then pin. Now, the dot is about 5/8 of an inch from the edge right here, but you could definitely measure and see where that dot is. But you're gonna create a line across, making sure that this part right here that's folded up is still folded up. Make sure you have those even. I'm going to pin at the bottom, and I'm going to do the exact same thing at the top. Now, remind you, I have facing right here, so your facing should be underneath the band. So when you turn it in, so basically when you do this, this is going to be cut off and make a nice clean finish like this, okay? It's gonna be a nice clean finish, and your facing should be underneath your band, front band, if that makes sense. It should look like this, all right? So that's what we're gonna do on this side if you did team facing, okay? So basically, same thing goes for this side. Now this part right here is about a 1/2 of an inch. The dot should be a 1/2 of an inch. So I'm just gonna pin right there as well. And what I'm gonna do is basically stitch across, making sure I start at this dot. I'm gonna stitch across there, and I'm going to stitch across at the bottom. Now, one thing I want to make sure that you know, after you do that, what we're going to do is finish off the bottom edge. Now, you necessarily do not, like right now, you really do not need to finish off this bottom edge unless you're doing like the skirt or something, but this is going to be attached, so it's not going to bug me right now to not have it finished off, because my pants is going to be attached, and then I'll serge the seams all together. So I will not be finishing off my seams right now for the bottom. All right. So just go to your sewing machine, stitch across 5/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom and a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top. Trim it down and then turn it right side out. Give it a press. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it sewn at the bottom and at the top, I went ahead and trimmed the top and then clipped into my curve. I'm gonna do the same thing for the bottom. I'm just gonna leave like a little bit right here. And then I'm going to turn it and kind of, you know, do the exact same thing and just leave like this tail peak right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it right side out, just like that. Well, push it right side out, you know. Use my point turner to poke out any of the corners to make sure that it is completely pulled out. Push that in, use my fingers to maneuver, and then use my point turner to push it out. Now that that is done, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna go to my pressing station, and then I'm just going to make sure that my seam allowance is a little over the stitching line that you see there. This stitching line right here, just make sure that you press your seam allowance a little over that, and then I'm going to pin it all in place, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that our bodice is done, it's looking really good, you guys. All right, so let's go ahead and move our bodice out of the way and start working on our pants for those of you who had enough fabric to make the pants, and for us who did not have enough fabric, so we made shorts, okay? So just move this out of the way. We will continue and attach it here shortly. But you guys know that your girl only had 3 yards of fabric. I know, it's really, really bad. But we're gonna make this 3 yards work for what I need it to work for. And I'm gonna be great doing it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're gonna attach our front to back. So one front to one back, and do our inseams, okay? So this is my front on both sides. So I'm gonna lay them on the table, right? And I'm going to take my front pattern piece. Now, I want to say these are my back pattern pieces that you're looking at on the table. Back pattern pieces. I'm going to take my pant front. That's why I label my pattern pieces so I don't get confused, okay? So that's one reason why I do that. So I'm going to lay my front right on top of my back, right sides together. And I'm going to pin the inseams, which is right here, okay? If you have pants, by all means, sew up your pants, okay? The inseam of your pants. But for the sake of this tutorial, and because I only had 3 yards of fabric, y'all, we're gonna go ahead and pin at this notch for your pants or your shorts, and then pin the length of your inseam, however long that may be, all right? On both of your pant front and pants back. Now, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, sew your seams together and then finish off your seam allowance and press your seams towards the back pants. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my front to my back at the inseam, I pressed my seam allowance towards the back because I serged them together in one seam. I also finished off my front crotch curve because there will be a zipper here, an invisible zipper, which I know you guys are like, why do we need an invisible zipper in the jumpsuit? Because we still have to pull it all off to go to the bathroom. You are absolutely right. But for the sake of this sew along, I am gonna go ahead and do the zipper, but I'm with you on, I don't know why we need the zipper. It's an invisible zipper, so I'm gonna show you how to install that as well. All right, so go ahead and take, what we're gonna do is put your front to your back, right sides together. So I'm gonna grab the other pant, or pants if you have pants, but mine are shorts. And I'm going to put them right sides together. If you did not finish off your crotch curve in the front, go ahead, or front curve, whichever one you want to call it, go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my crotch curve, and how I'm going to do that is match up my inseams and pin there, making sure that my seam allowance is to the back of me, or to the back pant leg or shorts, whatever you're going to be making. So my seam allowance is pressed towards the back. You see back, pant back on there. And then I'm just going to pin my crotch seam all the way around. So go ahead and make sure that you are pinning with raw edges even, and pin all the way around your crotch curve now. All right, so now that I have my crotch curve pin, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, we are going to start with at the front, back stitch at the beginning, and sew all the way down to this dot. But you're going to be using a basting stitch. So I'm going to base at the top, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way down to this dot, and then back stitch using a basting stitch. Once I get to this dot, because this is my pant front, I'm going to switch to a regular length stitch that I used to stitch up the rest of my pants. And I'm going to stitch all the way around the back, the curve, down and around the curve, and to the back using a regular length stitch. And then after I do that, I'm going to finish off my back seam allowance like I did for the front. Now, one thing I want to mention is, because this portion will be basted, and this portion underneath the dot will be a regular length stitch, you want to clip a little bit under the dot, because you're going to press it open in order to install your invisible zipper. All right. And make sure all of this is finished off along from the bottom, about 1 inch below that dot, all the way around. You want to finish that off with your seam allowance, your serger. I'm sorry. You want to finish off the seam allowance with your serger about 1 inch from this dot in the front all the way around. All right. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my inseam sewn, I have my crotch seam sewn. So what you're looking at is the front of my pant leg or pants, whatever, on the table. This is my close up basting stitch, and then the rest of it is sewn together. I'm just going to show you this all the way through the back. All right. Now, what I could do is go ahead and sew up my side seams, but let's go ahead and do the zipper before we do that, okay? So I'm going to turn it over to show you what it looks like on the inside of my front. We're just working on your pants or your shorts, whichever one you're doing. We're doing the front to that, all right? So this is the wrong side of the fabric facing up. And if you notice, I told you that I basted all the way down to the dot. I clipped into that. I clipped there without going through my seam allowance. And then I pressed my seams open. However, I did put some interfacing to stabilize my zipper area. If you've been following me for a while, you guys know that I like to do that to stabilize my zipper area when I am using a zipper. Now, I'm going to tell you guys now, do not judge me because I do not have a green zipper in order to do this. So we're going to use what we have, and it pretty much matches with the circles right here. So we're just going to use what we have from the stash, and I'm going to be using this gray zipper because it is invisible. So we're just going to go with it. All right, just work with me here. So what I'm going to do is the invisible zipper part where you have the zipper pull, I'm going to have that face down. So make sure you're doing it the same way. Now, mine is long, and you guys know I use long zippers. So I'm going to use the bottom portion of it, and I'm going to make sure that the zipper is kind of a little past that end. I'm going to turn it so you guys can see it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my zipper evenly. I'm going to make sure that that the zipper is on that line in the center. So pin that center zipper there now. And then all you're going to do is just basically, like you have seen me do for any zipper, pin on one side of the zipper like you see me doing here. Make sure that your zipper is in the center. You don't want a lopsided zipper, okay? And then pin all the way up. All right? All right, so now that I have my zipper attached to one side seam or one seam allowance for the zipper, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to base down this side and then base the other side as well. You guys know how to put in this invisible zipper. I have showed it so many times on this channel. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and do the zipper, install your zipper. So base all the way down one side, then base the other side. Open out your seam, get your seam ripper, open up those basting stitch, and then secure it the same way, okay? So I have showed this on the channel as well. I will drop a link to where I showed you how to do an invisible zipper as well, all right? Well, go ahead and sew on your invisible zipper, do that, come back, and we will continue sewing on the pockets as well as the side seams. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my zipper completely installed, it looks fabulous. Look, you're not gonna even be able to tell that this gray zipper is there. Yes, okay, we're gonna go ahead and close that up. Moving on to the next thing is your pockets. It's your pockets. They are your pockets, okay? So once again, you guys know how to install pockets. So what I'm gonna do is take two, and what we're gonna do is with right sides together, we're gonna go ahead and pin the pockets. So about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the side. Finish your seam allowance off, and then press your seams towards your pocket. Now, you're only gonna do this on your front pocket by understitching. Make sure you understitch on the front pocket only. Now, you guys know that I have done a pair of pants before for you guys, so it's pretty much the same thing. If you've seen my videos about pants and, you know, side seam pockets, you guys already know how to do it, all right? So go ahead and stitch on your pockets to your front and your back now, and then we'll go ahead and continue with the side seams. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the pocket sewn on to both sides, front and back, now this is the back facing up. I'm going to go ahead and take my front where my zipper is, and I'm going to lay it on top of my back. And then what I'm gonna do is go ahead and sew my side seams and stitch my pockets together to form a complete pair of pants or shorts. So you're going to do the same thing. Ignore my zipper because it's just a little too long, I know. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and turn it to the side, and definitely you guys know how to do this. So just go ahead and pin your side seam and your pockets, making sure that you matching up the side seams and the notches. So go ahead and pin all the way up your side seam, making sure that you stop at that dot. You have a dot there and a dot there. So make sure that you leave those open and you do not stitch your pocket closed, okay? You don't want to do that. So go ahead and pin all the way up your side seams and around your pockets now. All right, so now that I have the side seam and the pockets pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, come to this dot or this pin, back stitch there, break your threads. Then you want to sew from this dot right here all the way up to finish that off. And back stitch here at the beginning and then back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off go ahead and sew your pockets together and then finish them off. After you finish off your pocket, make sure you make a little clip right here and finish off the bottom edge. You can finish them together or you can finish them separately. That's completely up to you. Go ahead and do that now on both sides. All right, so one thing I want to tell you is before you attach your bodice onto your pants, one thing I'm going to tell you to do is to go ahead and take off this bottom piece. Reason being is because you need this piece in order to attach to your pants. So I want to make a correction. I'm going to bring the pattern instructions, and on the portion, if you are doing view C, the jumpsuit, the portion where it have you start working on your facing piece. which starts at step number 31. Do not, and I repeat, do not do step 31 through 33 like you see there, okay? So it have you start messing around with it during that time. So I was not supposed to attach my front bands there. I was supposed to wait until after doing the pants and place it on and then finish it off once my pants are on. But I'm going to correct that, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to correct that. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and unpick the bottom portion of that finished edge that I did. So I'm going to unpick that and then show you what to do next. So unpick that if you have already done so already now. All right, it's okay that you have that part cut off. It is okay because it's going to be cut off anyway when we finish it. So now that I have that unpicked, you're going to open up this edge, and all you're going to do is, leaving this pressed edge, you're going to pin that pressed edge there, just like so. I'm going to pin. And then, of course, that edge is going to be off, but it's okay. It's no problems there. You just want to make sure. Now, I'm going to pin from the inside, but I'm just going to show you from the outside right quick. So I'm on one side, and what you're going to do is make sure that this edge is lined up with your raw edge for your pants. And then you're going to pin. And then that's when you want to pin all the way around. It should fit. Everything should be nice and crisp. So go ahead and pin all the way around your pants now, and I'll show you what mine look like once I pin all the way around. So go ahead and do that now. Now that I have both sides done, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the middle to get that pinned all the way across as well. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way around, I'm going to start at one side. I'm going to start at this side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, and so all the way around and back stitch at the end. Go ahead and do that now. Once you finish doing that, finish off your seam allowance and press your seam allowance towards your bodice. Go ahead and do that now. Now, one thing I want to mention when you are sewing on your bodice to your pants, you want to start at the dot. So don't start all the way at the end. Start at the dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. So you go start at the dot, so all the way around, end at the dot on the other side. That's this dot right here, all right? Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have it sewn all the way around, I will be finishing up my inside and cleaning it up here shortly. But the next thing you want to do is you want to take this edge and place it for this edge. So basically, you're just going to match both of those edges up just like that. You will have a lot that you will need to be matching up. So you have this piece right here, which is your front band. You just match the two bottom edges of your front band, and then you're going to pin. There's a dot there, so you should be matching up at that dot, and you're going to pin, and you're going to do basically what we did before with the front band and just stitch across. All right, make sure that it is even all the way across. All right, so go ahead and stitch your band together now, just making sure that you stitch across at that dot. Go ahead and do that on both sides now. Now I'm going to show you one more time on this side. You remember you have that dot there, and all you're going to do is basically take this one and match it up to this one. So just fold it like this, match them up, right? It's going to look like a lot. I know, I get it. And you're going to pin. And I'm going to pin again, and then you're just going to sew where that dot is all the way across. It's about 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have that sewn, I'm going to show you what it looks like before I cut off my zipper. So now you have a finished front. It looks really nice. So this is what your front is looking like. Let me show you on both sides in the front before I cut off my zipper and finish off my insides, okay? So, all right, so this is what my little romper is looking like right now. Let me go ahead and zip this up. So it's gonna zip right there, and then I'm gonna have the buttons, okay? So that's what it's looking like right now for me. Just know that mine is not completely done because I have to flush it off by making sure that my zipper is good to go. All right, so once I do that, it'll fit perfectly, no problems. All right, now let's go ahead and do the next thing that we're going to be doing. After that is we're going to go ahead and make sure our band is attached at the front. So basically we're going to do a basting stitch all the way down our front band all the way to the end, and then on the right side we're going to top stitch to make sure that it's in place. All right, so what we're going to do, if you haven't press it to the inside and do a basting stitch all the way down to keep it in place. And then on the right side, you're going to top stitch where you put that basting stitch at. All right, so go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my jumpsuit completely done, I have the zipper done, I have the inside completely finished off, I have my placket area completely stitched, top stitched in place. I made my buttonhole. My zipper's looking good right here, up and down, just to give you some zipper action right there. That looks good. So the only thing, you only have two things left. Now, don't worry about my raw edge armholes because I got to buy some bias tape because I can't make any with this fabric. So I'm going to probably cut open some green fabric that I have in my stash. I'm going to show you guys that. So I have this gorgeous green that I'll probably use as bias tape, or some black fabric that I have in my stash that I have used for black tunic or whatever, and I could definitely use that for some bias tape for my armhole area. I think that's probably what I'm going to do and finish off this jumpsuit to take some photos, all right? But the only thing that you have left to do is to make your buttonholes, place your buttons on the other side, the placket. So you should have 4 buttonholes that you're gonna make. Place your 4 buttons on the outer side. Now I will be using these little green buttons. They're like a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I mean, a 1/2 inch buttons that I picked up in a pack from JoJo's, right? And then after you make your buttonholes and put on your buttons, now if you wanted to get creative, you could put some snaps on your flaps. You know, you could do that if you want. I'm not doing that because this is just like a basic jumpsuit, or I should say romper in my case. And then after you do your buttonholes and buttons, you're just going to go ahead and hem. I think the hem allowance is 1 1/4, but because this is a romper, I'm only doing 5/8 of an inch all the way around. I'm going to serge my raw edge and then press in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and then top stitch all the way around and stitch my hem in place. All right, once I do that, I am all done with my romper. Give it a wash, give it a press, take some photos, and you are all done. All right, now I'm glad that you hung in there with me for this romper. If you make this romper or pants, or the pants version or the skirt version, do not forget to tag me at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. So until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. All right, so there you have it. That is the complete pattern review and sew along. I hope you enjoyed, and you guys know what I'm gonna say. If you make this jumpsuit, romper, or whatever, don't forget to tag me in your video or your posting on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. So also, I hope you enjoyed this video, and since you made it this far, do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe button, and also smash that notification bell so your girl is notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.
tough. Yeah,